Good evening. The consensus-seeking efforts continues tonight. The head of the devolved units and members of the county assemblies are in Naivasha amid a growing disquiet, some warning that they will reject the report if it is not amended. A firm stance by President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga against a review of the BBI report, however, to some threatens to trigger an opposing camp. Tonight we make sense of the report on Pundits Night. I am Abubakar Abdullahi. Thank you as always for making time for us. Keep talking to us. Your opinion matters. Your voice counts. Send us a message on 22047. The hashtag to use is Pundits Night. Let me bring in my guests tonight. With me in studio is Professor Ole Ronke, who is a member of the steering committee of the Building Bridges Initiative. Herman Manyora is our resident analyst. Lawyer and Degwan Jiru will be joining us shortly on the show, but we have to start. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you both for making time for us tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening.
All right, Professor Ole Ronke, let me start with you. The Building Bridges Initiative report has been bedeviled for the last 1 week by allegations of a report that has been doctored. You are a part of the steering committee that brought forth the grievances of Kenyans and documented that to a report. First, is there a concern that this is a doctored report?
Let's put it very clearly. It is not a doctored report at all. We have, I think in the conversation that we have, and to be very honest to the Kenyans, we have two reports before us. We have the BBI task force report, which was part one, and then we have the steering committee report, which is a validation of the first report.
And those reports are of 2019 and 2020 respectively, is it so?
Correct. Correct.
So when a member of the steering committee, the retired Major John says that this is a report that has issues that we did not discuss that found their way in, you say he's lying?
I really don't think I would use those terms.
Is he telling the truth rather than?
To get into the details of that, let me answer it from where I stand with absolute clarity.
Go ahead.
The report has not been doctored. I have been in the task force from the very beginning to the very end. It has not, and I can say it emphatically. Nothing in the report has been doctored.
But this is a member of the committee you sit, and listen to what he says so that I bring Herman into the discussion as well. He says, and I quote, "We had no time to go through the document, and the 14 of us looked at each other in total disbelief when we were asked to sign the final BBI report that was set to be handed over to President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga." Did you have time to go through the document, Prof?
Yes, we did. Categorically. Because we had a task force team, we had a technical team that spent endless hours working on that report. Absolutely. We've had the time, we've gone through it from the very beginning to the very end.
So you did not, you say, look at each other in total disbelief,
no,
as this member says?
Absolutely not.
All right, let me bring Herman Manyora, our resident analyst, to the discussion. Herman, allegations of a report that has been doctored, will these puncture the progress of this report, in your own view?
Let's begin by saying that this is not surprising, because it's not the first time we hear people saying they were members of a committee and that they are not agreeing with the contents. Quite often they don't sign. But a few may sign, like Major retired John say, and then argue that they signed without reading. It's not new. And therefore, I don't think, to answer your question more directly, I don't think that will puncture the reports and the progress of BBI, because people are used to this kind of thing. And also, people also have the ability to read into things and see the politics. We looked at each other in bewilderment. Then you say you didn't know what you were signing. That indicates you knew there was something amiss before you signed. But the picture you are presenting is of a person who signed without knowing there was something inside. So the two are in conflict, and therefore one can easily see that it's more politics than reality. For that reason, I don't see this affecting the report in any significant way.
All right, Herman, let me get to Prof again. Prof, is it the ideal situation for the implementation of this report that a consensus is an ideal case for this matter?
You have to get back to the reason why BBI came into existence. The whole reason fundamentally was to bring the country together and the country to move as one. So therefore, what you're asking is exactly the very reason why BBI came into existence, to bring the country together as one.
But how easy will it, or will that be, understanding that there are leading politicians of the country, leading sectors as well, leading groups due to the economics or the geopolitics of the regions that they are from, who have pointed out to amendments to the report?
Any amendments to the report really, at this stage, needs to go to the principals. It's no longer to the team that was asked to do the initial assignment. The group that I am part of did our work, we finished, we handed over. Now, it was not set in stone. The principals that brought us on board are handling it. So if they feel that there are areas that needs to be tweaked, now, that is their prerogative.
But this voice of wanting to relook at this document is coming from people who believe as though there are areas that were not put in within the report. They feel as though their voices and the presentations they made in front of the committee that you are part of was not captured well.
If we went to the whole country, we collected tons and tons of information. We sieved through. We collated. We balanced. We did what is humanly practical to balance every piece of information. And please get 2 points on this one. To balance it up, but also to remain faithful to our mandate. There were very many things that were given to us that are outside of our mandate. And you know what the mandate was very clear. It's in the Gazette, it's very clear. Yes. So we try to remain faithful to our mandate, which is what we did. And so some of the issues that I have seen and I've heard coming out, in most cases, were issues that we could not really get into because they are outside of our mandate, to be quite honest. Yeah.
All right, let me get back to Herman. Herman, there are people who have made what they term as their solution so that a consensus is reached. For instance, the pastoralist communities leaders today with the former Prime Minister, some would say, Raila Odinga, gave their input to this document, which Raila Odinga said this will be taken into consideration into. The DP after that tweeted and he said, and I quote, "The petition by pastoralists that covers several areas in BBI is progressive. The public commitment to amend BBI to include these protocols is a welcome step towards consensus. With these and other petitions," he said, "a non-contested discourse is in the horizon." Herman, from an analytical point of view, there are those who say this is the Deputy President who is giving in after an initial resistance to the report. What do you make of that?
There are many ways of looking at this. First, we should also see those who are calling for consensus as falling in various groups. But let me just isolate 2 or 3, mainly 2. One, there will be those who will be doing so for political reasons.
You can hear it.
But there will be those who will be doing so because of genuine concerns. But again, like the professor there has said, some are outside the scope, some of the issues. Some may be within the scope, but you cannot put everything inside. Now, going to the politics part of it, there are those who may feel, and this has been said, that they genuinely, like I think Musalia Mudavadi, they genuinely want to be part of this process. But there are certain genuine things they think ought to be relooked or reintroduced, genuinely. But again, there are those who may be doing so either to scuttle the process, to delay the process for their own political interest, or there are again those, and I think DP Ruto falls in all these categories, if you wish, depending on how you look at it. There are those who may see they have no chance of fighting this process, and therefore want to join, kind of, but would want to do so apparently on their own terms, so that they come with their face, so that they don't appear to their followers as having lost. So you say, well, I went, but I gave my conditions, and the conditions were met, and that's why I went. So there are all sort of things, but I think at the end of the day, if we all agree on the way forward, I think it's good for the country. But at the same time, I don't think any dissent will be surprised. Any dissent will naturally mean you derail the process. I doubt. The process will go on.
And you believe the process will go on irrespective of who gives their reservations to the report as it is now?
Yeah, it's because, look here, there can never be a document or a position where there's unanimous agreement. Never. Even the wonderful Bombers draft, because the Bombers, I think, is the closest we go to the best. But there were people who were disagreeing with it. So something as critical as a constitutional change cannot attract unanimous agreement. No, you'll be expecting it too much. Those will not be human beings. They'll be creatures from Mars. Human beings cannot agree unanimously on something. There will be those who disagree, and that won't derail the process, like I said.
All right, Herman, and before we get to Mars and the creatures who will not agree on one agreement, let me bring back Professor Ole Ronke to the discussion. If then this report is subjected to a referendum in which we have comes per se of yes or no, is that not defeating of the very cause that the task force, the handshake, and the report was initiated for, which was to unite the country?
No.
How no, Prof?
Because I think, as Manyara has just said, let's understand one thing. It doesn't matter how good a document is. There will be somebody who sometimes will oppose even just for the sake of opposing. Just for the sake of opposing. Some of us, I read the Bible. There is a very classic one in a book called Nehemiah, where this guy is doing a great job of building a wall for the city of Jerusalem. And there's a Sanballat. He has absolutely no reason why he's opposing it, but he will oppose it. So even in this one, I'd prefer we have 10%, maybe 5%. The goal would be a total unanimous move. But if we still have the 10%, the 5%, let's accept it's okay. But the point here, I think we are fooling ourselves if we say we will get 100%.
All right, Prof, the report in part says, and I quote this, that Kenyans want to see inclusion in the executive while also wanting to directly vote for the president. When you talk of inclusion, what did the committee you are part of mean by so?
Inclusion in the sense that the whole idea of winner takes all in our election process, which has led to all the mischief that we've had, and therefore, and the subsequent violence and bloodshed. The inclusivity here is that the political players in our system, the political leaders in our system, become included, because at one point, you win the election with 51%. And I come second to you with 49%, and I'm completely kicked out of the entire system. The inclusivity there was where does the second person fit in, that second party, third party, in our overall political system, that we do not exclude those people and the electorate that put them there, because we've created a system of winner takes all.
Prof, with respect, that explanation sounds as though it is an inclusion for few. It's far from inclusion for the total Kenyans who want a government that is reflective of their dreams and aspirations, isn't it, Prof?
Inclusion for a few meaning what? The 49% Kenyans who went to the polls to elect that person who became number 2. He is representing the 49%. How are they being excluded, Kenyans? When we talk about Kenyans here, let's always be very careful. Because Kenyans mean the person who went to vote for this particular individual to go and represent him or her. Those are the Kenyans. It's a representative system. And we must look at that Kenyan we are describing as that person who voted for somebody to represent him or her. And when you exclude that person totally, you have excluded the entire 49% of Kenyans.
Prof, it's barely 3 days since there was an election in the US, and I want us to use that as an analogy to understand better what your argument is. Biden versus Trump. Trump loses, Biden is declared the winner. According to this report, it will mean Trump will still be in the system.
Not Trump as Trump, but the Republican Party.
Headed by Trump.
Well, in that case, no, you're talking about a totally different political system. Okay?
No, I'm just using this as an analogy so that we see if it is the people or the few political elite when we talk of inclusion.
Let's understand this. Because you use a wrong analogy, then we'll all go wrong. Okay? If Biden lost the election, he would be back in the Senate. He would not go anywhere. Harris would not go anywhere. She would lose the election and she will be back in the Senate as a senator. But that is their system. Okay? And if we use their system wrongly, in our case, then we will really mislead Kenyans.
All right, Herman, the president in his 28 minutes address, and long speech to the nation during the launch of the BBI report said, and I quote, that inclusivity is great. Which begs the question and the discussion we are having in the studio, is it inclusivity when we talk of the political class or the people?
I think really, because I've said this before here, there's some little echo, but let me continue. I have said this before, that ours is a representative democracy, as many others are. To that extent, therefore, we will be appreciating the fact that not all Kenyans will be there at the apex. So when the people you have, like my friend there said, the professor said, when the person you elected is included, then you too are included, because you all can go there. So really, inclusion must not be seen to mean perhaps that you need to have all people there. It has to be in our kind of democracy, the leaders we elect. So that's it. Whether or not I see that explanation as being really giving us what we call an inclusion is another different thing. Because I think, like I've said here before, there's so much laziness. We are prone to being lazy. When we are given a situation, we are lazy. So we say we are doing inclusion by merely introducing the leader of the official opposition. I think that's lazy. We should do a little more than that. But to answer your question directly, which I have done, it cannot be inclusion only if everybody is there, because that is not possible.
All right, fair enough.
Perhaps we believe the people you have put there will be talking for you, catering for your interests, and that therefore is inclusion.
All right, Prof, you have heard what Professor Herman has said of laziness when there is one or few positions created. You want to react to that?
Well, laziness in the sense of the translation by us Kenyans?
Yes, to address the question of inclusion by creating few positions for others.
Unless we honestly get out of this issue of, I don't know, an obsession with the so-called positions, and look at the bigger picture, we will be marking time. My view here is very clear. The whole inclusion is not the issue of 3 positions. It's a much broader thing. Because when you look at just one section of the Parliament of Kenya, where you're talking about the National Assembly, the Prime Minister in 2 positions, but you now go into the whole other area of leader of opposition, a shadow cabinet, and all that broader area. What that means is that when you're talking about who's being represented, has now a bigger voice, because those people in all those different positions within an existing system, you're not creating a bigger system. In fact, you are reorganizing government. Okay?
You say you're not creating necessarily other positions.
You are reorganizing.
And this will include the office of the Premier, who is picked by the President, from MPs in the majority party in the National Assembly, the official opposition leader, a mixed cabinet drawn from Parliament, and technocrats.
Very good.
Cabinet secretaries will be known as cabinet ministers.
Correct.
You're not expanding anything, you say?
Correct. And I think I can say that with absolute clarity.
Go ahead.
Because what you have done is you have taken and you've created a prime minister from somebody who has been elected, who is already in parliament. The 2 deputies are already in parliament. They're already members of parliament. Okay? The majority, or at least up to half, of the ministers will already be members of parliament. Okay? So, in effect, what you have done is you have actually shrunk it, because you no longer have the 22 ministers who are outside of parliament. You've now just reorganized so that the ministers are now coming out of elected members of parliament. Okay? And we also have a very clear thing here. I think we have to tell that to the Kenyans. Because you're a member of parliament, you cannot earn 2 salaries. So the premise is you start by earning your salary as a people's representative, as an MP. And what you get over and above, generally, is what comes with that office. The allowances that come with the added responsibility of you being the MP for such and such a constituency, and now the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Prof, you talk of reorganizing rather than creating these offices, which begs the question tonight, and I suppose this is what could be in the minds of people who are watching this show, and they can tell us what is in their mind. How will this impact Kenyans who are watching this show tonight?
It's not just the Kenyans who are watching this show tonight. It has to go beyond the Kenyans. It has to be to every Kenyan. Has to be to every Kenyan. Because one of the concern was, and it's still a concern, and it remains a concern for some time, is a very bloated government. So in the process of us putting these 2 documents together, we were very alive to that fact that we already have, as things stand, a very bloated government, thanks to our 2010 constitution. Okay? You talk about the 2/3 gender rule, for example. Okay? It is in the constitution. This is not a BBI issue. It is in the constitution. But now, you're being asked, can you find a formula to this without overly adding to the existing wage bill? And so you have a challenge before you as a team, as a group, that we are trying to do the calculation to answer that constitutional requirement without overly adding. And one of the reasons for creating this position and taking it into parliament was to try and answer that question of not adding more, but trying as much as possible within the parameters of our constitution to lower that.
And by lowering, each county will have a male and female senator, just to be clear, is it so?
Correct.
And these are not new positions. These are just a reorganization.
Correct. Of the former women rep.
Whom this report, if passed by Kenyans through a referendum, will mean there will be no position of a woman rep, but rather women will be the female senators of the county.
Correct.
Good. Let me bring Herman. Herman, Prof talks of the reorganization of the government or the executive for this matter rather than creating positions. But is it not the case, even if this will be a perception, that this report will create positions, even if this, I say, is a perception in the public?
It's not a perception, it's a reality, because how would you convince a Kenyan that bringing parliament, expanding it from 3-something to, I think, 360 is not expansion? How do you explain to the public that adding a few more commissions is not increasing the expenditure? How do you explain to Kenyans that the creation of prime minister is not going to add a cost? Because surely, we all know and we live in this world. Do you think the prime minister will only take an allowance beyond the salary of an MP? Surely. The sirens following him, the escort, and all the things. He will be spending a lot, several times more than what an ordinary member of parliament can spend. So that is not... so it's what I was saying, Abu Bakr, allow me. You see the laziness in terms of the architecture, in terms of the provision and how it is crafted. You see the laziness. Number two, you see lack of courage. We are not able to make certain decisions because we want to appear popular. So that you are talking about the 2/3 gender rule. We lack the courage to face Kenyans if we are leaders and tell them, look, we were excited at the time we were making this, giving these provisions. We have looked back as Kenyans, and I think we are not being good to ourselves as Kenyans. We love our mothers, our daughters, our wives, and all these people. But this country, like I've said repeatedly, is at a stage where we must move forward. We can't afford the luxury of just pleasing groups of people. We want the best man and woman for every available job. And even our mothers in the village, if you ask them, they will want somebody who will move this country to a level where when they go for maternity, they get services. They will want their children to get the best education.
But how many
what I'm saying?
How many you will also understand, and as you say, moving the country forward. Part of moving the country forward is for representation by women and for women, is it not, Haman?
Let me tell you, Abu Bakr, and this evening, allow me to use some bad words. Fools try to share what they have, what is not there. We are at the point of trying to create something we can share tomorrow. And we are sharing that which we have not created. Kenya has not reached a stage where we can go on a table and begin to distribute positions and share them. Because Kenya doesn't have what it should be distributing. We must be moving the country to a level where it will make its citizens happy by providing goods and services that they need. You get it? To do that, Herman, you don't need a woman or a man.
Herman, part of making the country and Kenyans happy is that you consider the compact majority of Kenyans who are women.
That's not how it's done. And let me tell you this in half a second.
That's what statistics say. You may say that's not how it is done, but that's what statistics say.
Let me tell. Allow me to tell Kenyans this, those who are watching, and those who will be told later. Europe and America and the rest of these developed countries are where they are because to organize society to be where they used blood and iron. Europe, the map of Europe was formed through war, through force, even as recently as early 1960s, places like Singapore. People used the force to create order and prosperity. After that, they knew, even to sustain that, they needed to have one principle as a guide. that you must look for the best men and women in your country to hold on to what you have, to sustain and to ensure if you are a German, Germany remains a society that cherishes happiness for its people and nothing but the best. You see, we now, in our backwardness, you see, we think we have reached at a point where we must please certain groups and there's nothing to give them. A pregnant mother does not care who is the representative, whether they are men or women. They don't care who occupies what position. All they care is when the time to deliver comes and they are not rich enough to go to a private hospital, they can only access a government facility. All they care is facilities within that hospital. That is at the level we are now.
Fair enough, Aman.
At some point when we have these things in place, we may begin to engage in the luxury to party he. Let's give it. No, we are wasting our time. So we lack the courage when we come to building our governance and things like those.
All right, let me get to Prof now. On the question of gender, the report, in what will be a big win for women, recommends that the running mate of every candidate for a governor should be of the opposite agenda. Kenya, as we speak, has a record 45 male governors, with majority of them running mates also being male. How then will men be compelled to have women as their running mates?
That is a political negotiation. I think at the end, first, it's a recommendation. This has not been set in stone. And I think you see it in the report.
Yes.
Okay? The report says very clearly that this is not, it doesn't say that this has been set in stone, that it must happen. I think it's a recommendation. There's a lot of conversation going on in that regard on the language, the final language on that one, where because of politics, you cannot force an individual, you cannot force the lady, you cannot force the man to have somebody of the opposite gender. But that this should be one of the best recommendations. And I think that is still open, so that when it comes into law, I think it's still being negotiated to say, should it be set in stone that you must, that you shall have to, you shall. I think it's a recommendation at this point.
Prof, you talk of recommendations, negotiations. Is that a hint from your end that the report that the steering committee that you are part of gave is not necessarily a final document?
We were hired to do a job.
Fair enough.
And do our part. And we did our part as per the stipulation of our assignment. And we completed it honorably. Now, the appointing authority, do they have the right to change some things in the report we have given? Of course they do. Yes. And so let's accept that also.
All right. Herman, is it now a case then that, as Prof tells me in studio tonight, and I'm sure you can hear him, that whatever has been presented is open to further scrutiny, further discussions, further negotiations, and a further result?
That should be the ideal situation, because really there are issues that come up. Once you put something out there, it is received and people will have things to say about it. Some of the things they say might be good and genuine. So ideally, yes, but again, from a practical point of view, if you open this, just how many other times will you open? That you must bring something to closure. You must bring it to closure. So I think the question you are asking the professor there was, these governors being asked to have the opposite gender as running mate, the way he responded to it is what led you to ask, to have the feeling that, well, looks like this thing is opened. But I think it is because it was not stated categorically in the report, unless I'm wrong. It's not categorical.
It's not categorical.
That's,
yeah, right.
As a gubernatorial candidate, you must have the opposite gender as your running mate. I don't think it was categorical. Yeah, it was like a suggestion that you are encouraged, or so. I can't remember the words, but it wasn't quite that way. But certainly, if you ask me from where I sit, I am convinced that there will be a few changes to this document. Like you can see, I'm also pointing out some of the things I think, they were not quite well thought of. And the same people we seem to be talking for may not be happy with the extra burden, for example, in terms of the bloated parliament. I don't think Kenyans will love that. I know they may not change it. In terms of the 70 extra seats, even how, if you ask our friend in the studio there, how are they going to arrive at the 70 members of parliament? It is rather tricky. So I think they will look at some parts of that report.
And Haman,
the Raila and yeah.
Prof agrees with you that the arrival to the sharing of those seats is as well tricky. And I wanted to give him a right to respond to that. You say it is tricky equally?
Correct. Go ahead.
Well, it is, I think, mixed member proportional representation. It's a mouthful. Okay? It's a mouthful. But we did our part in terms of trying to seek for a solution. Okay? And what we came down to was the mixed member proportional representation, where you retain the 290 seats. And then now begin a journey there to say, how do you get the 2/3, depending first on how many women have been elected within the 290. So if Kenya decides to elect all 290 men, then that is when you have to start thinking about that 70. But
these 70 are constituencies that will eventually be shared as per regions.
So we met the recommendation, okay, having done all the work we did, and now we leave it to experts to really nail it down, and to the principals first of all, whether they agree on our recommendation. You have to understand. Let's put this before Kenyans, okay? We've been given work to do. We did the work. We presented it to the principal. Okay? Now, the question is, they might be the ones saying, we like this, but I think we need to modify this. We need to tweak this. Okay? Now, this is one of them, where they're going to say, okay, we will put our best mathematicians on the ground to see how they'll calculate this recommendation you've made for us to arrive at the 1/3 gender rule.
Prof, on several occasions in this interview, you've told me you have been hired to do this. This is a job that you have been given and you did this. And we are questioning the work that has been done. And it's a document that is in the public, hence open to a public scrutiny. You
Absolutely.
have the two versions.
I have the two versions in front of me.
Studio. Still on the question of 70, it's not addressing the question of women and the 2/3 gender rule, isn't it? These are creation of other constituencies that will be in addition to what is already there. And there's no guarantee that a male or a female or any other gender will be elected based on that 70 extra constituencies.
No. To the best of my knowledge, to the best of my understanding, this is not the creation of another constituencies.
To the best of your knowledge,
in terms of drawing up constituencies.
Yeah. And to the best of your knowledge, what is it then?
The mixed member representation will be the people that you're trying to fill that gap using the political parties list. That every political party, and if you get in depth into the document now, you're now trying to go into the nitty-gritty details of the fine print. If you get into that, the bulk of the work will now rest on the political parties. So political parties will now need to work extra hard, because those numbers that will come in will be assigned to political parties by IEBC based on the strength of the political party. And the strength of the political party, okay, let me see if I can put this in very clear, succinct English. The strength of the political party will no longer be how many members of parliament you have. It will be calculated based on how many people voted for you. How many people did you get? And so what it does then is that it now allows the political party that might have so many MPs, but the second party always came second, and does not get recognized in this case. In this regard, what it does now is it takes the actual number of Kenyans who voted for that party, and we use that number to now calculate how the 70 will be arrived at. On a television station, we're not going to be able to do that mathematics here. But that is the gist of what you're going to find in here.
And whereas we may not do the mathematics, and you have explained, Prof, Kenyans, of course, because of the public interest in this report, deserve an explanation, which you have done. And before I move to Herman, then what will be the criteria? Let's get to the nitty-gritties that you talked of. The criteria that Party A got 10,000, 20,000 votes, and there are chances that they may be the lead, producing an MP in a certain constituency, but they may not have a chance to have X amount from the 70.
I think you still have to go really back to that proportional. What does the proportional mean? The proportional there means you have 10,000 votes, I have 8,900. The gap is very small. In this regard, I will not be totally ignored in the way the proportional representation will be done. While what we have now is that because I have lost to you by that tiny margin, I am completely ignored.
But is it not the case
my party is totally ignored.
Prof, is it not the case and the eventualities of a democracy that if you win, you win, if you don't? Not in the divisive nature of the politics of this our beautiful country, which unfortunately we have to address. Okay? We are heavily tribal, we are heavily regional, and we use that as a way to either get in or kicked out, and to try our best to deal with our reality. And this is our reality. Let's not run away from it. Yes, we are ethnic, we are very tribal. How do we begin a journey that slowly begins to dent that and truly make us Kenyans? Fair enough. Let me get to Professor Herman Manyora. Herman, moving on from that, the governors are tonight in Naivasha. They are among the growing disgruntled parties who are pushing for a review of the document. Some of the things that they want looked into is, for instance, they are demanding that the BBI report be revised to give them a free hand to pick their deputies after the general election. They also want power to fire and hire their deputies. They want the removal of the proposal that chooses deputies from the opposite gender. They want the county chiefs, and what they are pushing for is the strengthening of the Senate as the upper house. We'll come to that a little bit later. Just on the deputies, is it too risky to hand the power to fire and hire the governors themselves?
We were there at the national level. President Kenyatta, President Moi, and President Kibaki had the power to hire and fire their vice presidents. I don't think there was anything major that happened. It happens across the world. Really, I don't see that as anything. In fact, given a choice, I'll go for that one. I'll go for the one where the president has free hand to fire his deputy, and the governor has free hand. That way, we will need to look at this arrangement much more critically. Because like I'm going back to, we are not very critical in the way we look at things. Just to allow me to go back, those 70 seats, you can see our friend is unable quite to explain. When I was doing economics somewhere, I was told things like taxation and many other processes must be as simple as possible. So if you want to distribute 70 seats, surely if you are genuine, unless you are sneaking the one man, one vote, 1 shilling through the back door, it should be a very simple, straightforward issue, which you can explain to Kenyans, but you can see I've listened to them explaining, they really can't. So back to your issue of vice president. If you look at the American history and other places, there's a reason why you need a running mate. You need a running mate, for example, to convince the voter that should something happen to you, then this is the person who can take. Now, judging whether to vote for you as a governor or as a president or not, your running mate comes in. So they are saying, supposing something happened to so-and-so when I have made them governor or president, will I be comfortable with this particular person taking over? I think that is the thinking. But when you look at the practice in this country, does it really work like that? Do people even judge the candidate on the basis of that? Do governors appoint people as running mates, name people as running mates, because they are capable? The answer is certainly no. That is why, as soon as they are elected, they are at loggerheads. The deputy governors are doing nothing. They are idling and they are in conflict with the governors because the governor only picked the deputy governor because it's a requirement. Secondly, you went to an area or a clan or a certain part of the county and they picked a running mate so that you could get votes from there. In other words, we have not established that culture or that tradition where you carefully pick a running mate to convince the voter that I'm Joe Biden. Do you think if I'm not there, this Kamala Harris can be your president? And the voter nods the head, yes, this woman can be president. You see, are we there? The answer is no. So I don't see anything wrong in the demand by governors. It can be given, it can be granted.
All right.
So it doesn't make a difference to me.
Fair enough, Herman. Prof, you want to react to that as well?
I think the recommendation that is there, and it's also very clear, is that you allow the governor to run as a governor, appoint his deputy, that's a recommendation, after, who is also one of his CECs. So he has an assignment. So he's the deputy governor and the minister for trade. So he has a portfolio. That person has a portfolio. If the governor dies, the deputy will take over for 90 days, upon which an election is done. The person does not finish the term of the governor.
And we are talking of a deputy for this instance who has been appointed by the governor after he was elected to office.
Correct.
So he has been hired by the governor.
Yes.
There's no political muscle and weight, as some say, that is required for him to be the deputy governor, to be on the ballot as well.
That is what we've recommended, to remove that. Okay. Now, will it happen? That I don't know. But have we recommended? Yes. So the recommendation was that. The recommendation was to give the deputy governor something to do, to get work to do. That recommendation was put forward. These are political issues. But you put them forward in the best interest that this will work best. They will now have, the deputy governor will now have assignments to do. You know, I mean, you had Vice President George Saitoti and Minister for Finance. Okay, why not have a similar thing?
Fair enough. Herman, looking at the governors and what they are putting forward as their demand, how easy or otherwise will it be for President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga to please them, noting that at least 24 assemblies must approve a referendum bill for it to pass through?
That's where we went wrong from 2010. Putting things in the constitution to please people. And they come back to haunt us sometimes. And now I'm saying we must be bold as Kenyans. A leader is he who makes sometimes very unpopular decisions for their people. Throughout history it has happened. If you look at kingdoms and chieftains and even the Bible and even whatever religious books, and you read that leaders sometimes make very unpopular decisions, but they are doing so in the interest of society. So, well, if you want to please, how many people will you please? We did that in 2010, and if I don't want to go into the details, but if you go into the Constitution, there are so many things, including the bloated cabinet, including all manner of commissions here and there. But the governors, of course, may have a point. If they have a point, and if the document is being amended, then on the merit of what they are saying, that those changes could be incorporated in the new document. I'm seeing nothing wrong with that, but they must have a point. But it can't be small little things they are talking about. They must have very serious issues so that they also give Raila and Uhuru an easy time. They should not make it so difficult for Raila and Uhuru, because I believe these two gentlemen, when they say they want to work for this country and change this country for the better. So I hope their demands will not be unreasonable demands. If they are reasonable, well and good, they should be incorporated.
All right, Herman, Prof, because of the interest of time, we need to wind up, but nonetheless, what was the philosophy behind the recommendation of the creation of an ombudsman for the judiciary?
Following a very lengthy discussion on that one, not touching on the independence of the judiciary, the understanding was that the Kenyans needs a place to go to complain about the judiciary itself. That you have a case that has been dragging on for 25 years and is still going nowhere, and you don't know where to go to complain.
But Kenyans go to the judiciary to complain about the judiciary itself, even now.
Yes.
There are courts of appeal. A judge can relook into a decision made by a certain court.
I think we miss a point there. There are some very basic fundamental issues that an ombudsman would do very well for Kenyans. It becomes the office that is easily accessible, where those things can be put together for the sake of that general mwananchi. The system as it is now is very complex, and yes, you and I can get access to that place and appeal and reappeal, but not necessarily the general public. By creating an office of an ombudsman, an office where every general Kenyan can go into, easily accessible, with branches in every county, where they can then go in there and file their cases. That you're not filing a case. You're saying, I have a problem. The court has not handled it. Somebody needs to listen to me. And that is where it begins.
And Prof, this is a hotly contested recommendation that has been up for public debate, and you will understand why. Primarily because of the back and forth between the executive and the judiciary in this country. Was it wise to make such a recommendation that seemed as though this was the executive as it is now saying, let's put a head over the judiciary?
Well, we felt it was the right thing to do. We felt it was a right recommendation to make. That if nothing else, let it create the conversation that it has created, and let a decision be made on it. But we felt it was a right recommendation to put forward, and have the principals look at it, and have the country look at it, and basically see the merit and demerit of it. But we felt as a team that it was a right recommendation to put here and let it be subjected to debate.
Herman?
You see, Professor is now turning the document into a recommendation. He keeps saying that we are putting there for the principals. I thought this was a final document where perhaps out of pressure, a small window could be opened to incorporate what Mudavadi and the rest are. Now the way he's putting it, it's like they just did recommendations, but there's already a bill. There are certain very categorical positions stated, including the bill. So I think you are not being fair to Kenyans, Professor. Again, you know, the moment you talked about ombudsman and said the president will appoint, you immediately created the perception that the executive would want more power in the Judicial Service Commission. That is obvious. So this is the laziness I'm talking about. One, you could have come up with the same ombudsman If you believed in him, I don't. We have had an ombudsman from 2010, I think it was Otienda Molo. What change did he ever bring into the country? Which ordinary Kenyan ever walked to the ombudsman and got something out of it? They never did that. So laziness in this country is what will kill us. If you want that Kenyans are suffering, you must go and look at the administration of justice in this country. My mother had a case, my own mother, my late mother. She went on with the case with the sister for like 30 years. She died. The sister died later. I was put on the case. I have given up 40, 50 years. Cases of land, there must be a different way of approaching those cases. Not an ombudsman. Look here. If somebody says, this is my land, if the court were to move to the ground, as people say, with the chiefs and everybody else, the thing can be sorted out. There are certain cases we have in the courts which we can start a process of clerking. You clerk a case so that the court can ask you certain questions when you go to court. Okay, you are lodging this case. Can you please serve us with 1, 2, 3, 4? So that the courts are also proactive. Our courts are hiding in the judicial system that is adversarial, so that the judge just sits there and listens, or the magistrate. We must move away from that, where the court can also interrogate you, challenge you, ask you to bring certain things to the court through the registry or the clerk. And then the cases can be fast-tracked.
All right.
It's not a question of ombudsman.
All right, Herman, you say
my mother would never have reached that ombudsman if she was alive. Even if she was alive, she can't. But you know, when you introduce, just a second, Bakari, when you introduce ombudsman, the idea could be good. But what is the perception? You want a document to be bought in by Kenyans, and yet you put things in that document that will immediately raise the antenna of Kenyans, and attract, suspicion.
All right, Herman, you talk of perception, Prof. You had signaled that you wanted to.
I think, Herman, the conversation we're having is the same one that we had in our team. Understand that among the people we have is the Attorney General Emeritus, among others who are senior counsels, and the conversation went back and forth, including first thinking that we should recommend that the person be hired by the judiciary itself, the Chief Justice, and that seemed to create even more suspicion that nothing will be happening because it will just be an internal affair thing. But that with all the options we have, and this is done and discussed in total sincerity, that by having these three people and the person eventually vetted by Parliament, that it will be our better bet than the other one. This was thoroughly discussed. We came to that conclusion after heavy conversation. So there wasn't a frivolous suggestion on it. It was thoroughly discussed. And I think at the end of the day, as you have personally said in earlier statements, you have to put in something, and you put it in good faith. There will be suspicions, but if you can do it in good faith and you truly believe that that was the best at that particular time, then you go with it.
All right, Professor Ole Herman, 30 seconds because of the interest of time. Go ahead.
I would have thought if you wanted to help Kenyans, the least you could perhaps do, which can really work, you say every county shall appoint an ombudsman specifically to cater for certain issues like judiciary, land issues, and so on and so forth. And they will have offices from the county to the sub-county to the ward level.
All right.
That way they will be able to filter the problems and then collect the things and have them addressed by the judiciary in this instance, or the lands office. Right from the county, sub-county to the ward level, those kind of offices to collect views on different aspects, not just the judiciary. There will be one on land, which is always a contentious issue.
All right.
There will be one on the judiciary, and so on and so forth. That will work for Kenyans, instead of creating an office where Kenyans cannot access. It is me who will access it, not my sister.
All right.
Go to school very well.
All right, Herman Manyora is our resident analyst. Professor Ole Ronke, thank you both for making time for us tonight.
Thank you.
You're watching Pundits Night with me, Abu Bakr Abdullahi. Keep talking to us. The hashtag to use tonight is Pundits Night. Let me go through some of your feedback. TV47, I'm Jacob Labot from Eldama Ravine. What or why take us back? Because if the president will be appointing the prime minister and the ministers and others, asks Jacob. James Ignatius on Facebook says, of more concern is the fact that majority of Kenyans have not read the BBI report. Majority claim they only hear about it through the media. My take is that the government should embark on civic education and devise a mechanism through which all Kenyans will access the crucial document before making the decision on whether or not to reject it. Professor Manyora has spoken, says Amigo on Facebook. Emma Manu says, please bring Miguna in this conversation. Our country is being sold to selfish principles. Mungu saidia. Christopher Musumba says there is no inclusivity in Kenya if you don't address sitting president and strong opposition leader rigging elections. That's why we'll have to end this discussion on behalf of the entire team that made this production possible. I am Abu Bakr Abdullahi. Bye for now. Enjoy the rest of our programs.